Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Intrinsic Report. I'm your host, Martin K. Iraq and Russiagate coverages are very similar. Both started with false information, and the media made the propaganda successful. How did the so-called free press wind up here? Few journalists want to end up like Assange. Disinformation has ranked in search twice. First was in the post-release of the Iraq war logs back in 2004, and during Trump's presidency throughout 2016, 2017, 2018. What does this rare buzzword mean? Well, characteristically, disinformation is false, deliberate, malicious, and deceptive information that is put out there. And this could be in different forms: news stories, manipulated videos, hoaxes, and conspiracy theories. What I'd like for you to understand before we begin is that disinformation has its origin in the Soviet era. It was actually started by Josef Stalin in 1923 when he set up the Special Disinformation Office. Sounds very familiar, right? To what the DHS is doing right now. What is important to understand is that the function of the Special Disinformation Office was to destabilize and to divide other countries. Another characteristic about disinformation that we shall add is that it is not only intentional, but it is also untrue, and it's fabricated. And it's even more dangerous when it comes from state agencies, because state agencies expect that they won't be questioned, that the majority will be uncritical, they will simply submit, and therefore they can manufacture a forced consensus. A practice like this, started by a Soviet-era dictator, has become common practice in democracies today. Let's travel back in time. The year is 2016, and Trump won the GOP nomination. The Democrat Party had rigged out an anti-establishment nominee, Bernie Sanders, in favor of Hillary Clinton. The Republican Party, however, conceded to populism with the nomination of Donald Trump. Trump, like Sanders, had signaled a willingness to undertake major policy shifts, holding widespread public appeal. The most noteworthy of these were directly at odds with the long-standing position of their respective parties. Trump promised to rein in free trade, just like Bernie Sanders, curb influence of powerful lobbyists, just like Bernie Sanders, and engage in a less militaristic foreign policy, just like Bernie Sanders. But Trump went even further. He vowed to impose unprecedented restrictions on legal and illegal immigrations, and this fired up his base. So come November of 2016, Trump wins a shocking victory in that elections. This was simply democracy at work for the peasant class to punish the political elite. It was nothing short of historic, but the privileged of America just couldn't believe it. Trump was not fit for office. That much I concede. He just wasn't qualified. He had neither military nor political experience. Hillary, however, by contrast, checked all the right boxes. And to top it all off, she was a woman. So how did a strong, capable woman lose to a rookie in today's America? After all the barriers women have overcome to prove themselves, how could it come to this? The cognitive dissonance could only be explained away by one thing: Putin. that half human, half demon living in the distant lands of Russia had anointed Trump as the future president of America with a mission of one thing: desecrating democracy. The liberal media and Democrat officials lapped it up. To a lot of Democrat voters, they found solace in this. Little did they know that it was a fictional narrative sitting on a shelf at a local library. The title is The Plot Against America. It was published by Philip Roth in 2004. In this alternative history, Franklin D. Roosevelt loses the 1940 elections to a Russian-backed candidate. The folklore was given credence by the publication of the Steele dossier, what had turned into formal allegations against new President Trump was funded by the Clinton affiliation of the Democrat Party. But this would only become public knowledge when the narrative collapsed in 2019. So this is the smug face of the FBI official who put his career on the line to pursue the Trump-Russia collusion case. And I wonder what he had going through his mind on this day. At this point, I just have to ask, why were the Clinton campaign and the FBI invested in overturning illegitimate elections? Also, why were the media and the Democrat Party ecstatic about undoing the results of a democratic process while arguing it wrong for Russia to have undermined a US election? Bit of a double standard there, don't you think? Back to our newly elected president. Imagine reporting to a new job just to be bombarded with office rumors about things that could make you lose your job. That was 2017 through 2018 for President Trump. And here he had thought he would get along well with the media. Why were the Democrat politicians, legacy media, and state agencies coming after him for something that simply wasn't true? And why was everyone so gullible? See, every mainstream news outlet was making him out to be a Kremlin puppet. Except for Fox, who dismissed it as a witch hunt. Now, you know something is terribly wrong if what should be a cunning canine is the only voice of reason. Trump's critics wanted the allegations to be true so much that they kept harping the same questions over and over. And it didn't matter how more reasonable the Trump's base was with their responses to Russiagate. In truth, the accusations were baseless. They served no other purpose but to undermine his election victory. They foiled US diplomatic relations with Russia and impeded on his duty to govern. The allegations and dogged investigations put Trump in the proverbial ball and chains until his time in office was up. Throughout his presidency, Trump repeated like an automation, no collusion. But his fortunes would only turn with the conclusion of the Robert Mueller investigation in 2019. From the Mueller's report, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. And the only indictment of Trump officials were for other crimes other than espionage. So in short, Trump was right all along. This isn't the outcome the Democrats and the liberal media had counted on. The legacy media had shown themselves to be, as Trump likes to put it, fake news. How did the so-called free press wind up here? Well, it has to do with how the media filters what is legitimate news discourse. One is monopoly. The US legacy media almost always expects that it will stand unchallenged, or that it has the upper hand in controlling the narrative. The other is profits. Now, since Hillary had won the popular vote, it made sense for them to double down on the grievances of Democrat voters reeling from the election upset. This appeal to so wide a group could guarantee viewership and drive ad revenue. Methodology is another. The media clamors to keep a good relationship with institutions, often at the expense of real journalism. And this is the reason that most will uncritically repeat false information tipped to them by authorities. Fear is another. Few journalists want to end up like Assange. But the most powerful one here is ideology. The media must align its reporting to cater to powerful interests who spend on ads. They must join in when the US government bares its fangs at geopolitical rivals and support all military adventurism. And this is how we end up here, to a moment when the words in red are spoken by an executive editor of the New York Times. And this was right after it became clear that a Trump ouster wasn't happening. The executive editor at the Times in question is Dean Baquet, and it is reported that speaking to his colleagues in a town hall meeting soon after the Mueller's testimony concluded, Dean acknowledged that the Times had been caught a little tiny bit flat-footed by the outcome of the Mueller's investigation. But it's one thing to admit that to your colleagues, and quite another to come out publicly saying it. To an official statement to the Columbia Journalism Review, the Times stood by its reporting and only reiterated all their previous stellar work and awards. So in other words, publicly, they weren't taking any accountability. Another media heavyweight here says that the Trump-Russia saga wasn't handled well and newsrooms need to do a lot of introspection. It's unfortunate that media houses will not conduct any post-mortem of their coverage on Russiagate. And this includes even the Times, which set a precedent in journalism by interrogating and reviewing the coverage of the Iraq War. Irish MP Boyd Barrett notes that Iraq and Russiagate coverages are very similar. Both started with false information. The media sensationalized them. The media was uncritical of official reports. And the media made the propaganda successful. The media worked tirelessly to regain public trust in the years post the Iraq War. And by 2016, most Americans had a positive view of the media. The media, however, chose to flush public trust down the tubes with Russiagate, and one can only wonder why. As of 2021, 83% of Americans were taking issue with fake news, and 56% were agreeing that the media was truly the enemy of the people. According to another 2022 study, the US media had the lowest credibility score out of 46 countries. What is most surprising to me is that legacy media has preferred to label people like you and I as bad actors spreading disinformation, rather than to offer an acknowledgement of how they have failed the public. Their uncritical repetition of reports by powerful interests is journalistic malpractice. And that is how we end up with a disinformation pandemic. And there you have it, disinformation. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did, let me know by giving the video a thumbs up. Leave me a comment down below. And if you're new here, hey, consider subscribing to the channel. I look forward to seeing you again in the next one. Take care.